Hello, and welcome to Phenomenon Radio, the show that covers thought-provoking breakthroughs in the fields of UAP UFOs to discover fascinating truths, first-hand accounts, and investigative insights into the expanding confluence of physical and mental exposure to this worldwide phenomenon. Hosted by world-renowned experiencer of the 1980 Rendlesham Bentwaters UFO incident, John Burroughs, and Emmy Award-winning investigative journalist, Linda Moulton Howe. And now, leading off the program, here's Linda Moulton Howe.
Many mysteries after the UK Rendlesham Forest lights and beams phenomena of December 26 to 28, 1980, one of the most puzzling are the several pages of zeros and ones that former U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant James Penniston says that he wrote down a couple of days later at the back of his notebook. But Jim says he never told anyone, including John Burroughs, who was the airman first class walking right next to Sergeant Penniston in Rendlesham Forest. Another issue is that John's memory has been blocked ever since lights interacted with him in the forest on both December 26th and 28th of 1980. It was not until October 2nd, 2010, that's 30 years after Rendlesham, that Sergeant Penniston finally showed John Burroughs and me those zeros and ones while the three of us were working in Phoenix with the Ancient Aliens TV production for the History Channel. At the end of that production day, Jim opened up his notebook to the end pages, showed us the stream of zeros and ones, and told us he had deliberately kept the numbers in the notebook a secret since December 1980. He said it was because he had been warned by Air Force and intelligence authorities not to talk. But unlike John's blocked memory, Jim Penniston never forgot the blast of white light from which a triangular black craft emerged suspended a few feet above the ground by light and apparently tripod legs that left impressions in the forest ground. Back in 1997 to 1998, when I was writing my third book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, the first section of the book is about military experiences with UFOs. I contacted Jim Penniston about the September 1994 hypnosis session that he had done and videotaped, trying to recall what had happened in Rendlesham Forest and afterward. That's when intelligence agents ordered Sergeant Penniston to do chemically induced hypnosis. The agents began by asking him about symbols that Jim was seeing on the craft that he had not wanted to discuss with anyone, but the intelligence agents seemed to know about the symbols. The Penniston 1994 hypnosis transcript, repeated in my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness, says, quote, this is Penniston, I said, meaning to these intelligence agents, I felt the symbols because they were raised. Something later on he would say was not correct, but this is what he said in 1994. I said I felt the symbols because they were raised. They are asking me if I see binary code. I see the binary code, and then he says, I'm the interpreter. You can't read these codes unless you have an interpreter, close quote. Back then, in the late 1990s, I had heard people in the human abduction syndrome talk about seeing symbols, but no one meant literal streams of zeros and ones coming into their mind in one long download and staying there until they were copied down. Further, Jim Penniston never said in 1998, when I was talking to him, that he had actually retained a long stream of binary code in his mind's eye that he had written down in his notebook. The word that was stressed were symbols. Perhaps I would have learned more about his secret binary code when I was working on Glimpses Volume 2, But soon after, Penniston and I had talked on the phone, and he had given me permission to include some of his 1994 hypnosis transcript in my book. There was interference from former Deputy Base Commander Charles Halt, who told Jim not to talk with me anymore because Halt was going to work exclusively with Jim on another project. It would be another 11 years later that former Staff Sergeant Jim Penniston agreed to talk with me for a recorded phone interview on September 24th, 2009. And that is when John Burroughs had reached out to Jim and others to compare Rendlesham Forest experiences that seemed to be differently remembered from one person to another, as if everyone's minds had been affected in different ways by something no one understood. By 2009, I had heard the concept of self-activating software in alien technologies related to symbols on craft surfaces. So during our recorded interview, as Sergeant Penniston said that he touched symbols on the Rendlesham Forest craft, I asked half a dozen times if he remembered telepathic thought or other images entering his mind from the extraordinary machine in front of him. However, even then, in 2009, he never mentioned having secretly written binary code down in his notebook after the December 26, 1980 craft encounter. And here now is Jim Penniston.
It was a triangular craft. The fabric of the craft was black like glass. Throughout the fabric of the craft, there was lights varying from saucer shape to circles that moved around the craft. Some were red and blue, some orange.
You are seeing what look like changing geometric patterns of different colors below the glass or above the glass?
Predominantly below the glass on the underside of the craft. They were varying from saucer size to plate size, round type globs of color. But I think what stands out is the blackness of the craft. The best way to describe it, if you took an onyx stone that measured 9 feet long and 6 feet high, that's what you would see. Very unusual. As I walked around that craft, my second or third time in awe, toward one side of the craft, there was markings on the craft, probably 2.5, 3 feet wide. There were a series of symbols etched in the fabric of the craft. They felt that way to the touch.
And when did you touch it?
I was looking for a crew compartment or a window or something. As I felt my way around the symbols, feeling each one, put my fingers on top of them. There was no indentation. If you had a sheet of smooth glass and you took a piece of sandpaper and you laid it on that glass, running from the glass surface to the sandpaper, that's how it felt.
So it is a different surface texture.
Correct.
When your fingers touch the symbols, did you have anything come into your mind in terms of thought or image?
Did I feel intelligence? Yes.
Do you remember recalling some mental impression that you relate to touching the symbols on the triangular craft?
Well, it was very hard to sleep at night after that. And I had this feeling that there would be a return of that craft sometime. I don't know, it was just a very odd thought. Today,
in November of 2015, we now know that Jim Penniston finally showed for the first time in October 2010 in Phoenix the zeros and ones he says he wrote down in the end pages of his notebook. That binary code was translated into words and several Earth latitudes and longitudes. Now, adding to the UFO symbols binary code mystery is a similar and recent 2015 UFO encounter case in Wadley, Georgia, in which a U.S. Army sergeant found himself writing down squares and lines in a series that are like zeros and ones in binary code. Both the December 1980 and June 2015 translations have latitudes and longitudes, and they even have matching words. Helping me to analyze the binary code from both U.S. Air Force Sergeant Penniston's Rendlesham Forest experience and the U.S. Army Sergeant's encounter in Georgia is chemist Horace Drew, Ph.D. Dr. Drew is also known in crop formation research as Red Collie. Horace Drew received his Ph.D. in chemistry from the California Institute of Technology in 1981. Afterward, his postdoctoral research included the Molecular Biology Institute at the University of California, Los Angeles in 1982, and the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, England from 1983 to 1986. And then in 1987, Dr. Drew was hired as senior research scientist at the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization in Sydney, Australia. He retired in 2010 and lives with his wife, Max, in Sydney. During his Caltech PhD research, Dr. Drew did several of the first high-resolution atomic structures ever done of left or right-handed DNA. Dr. Drew has authored some 50 papers in major peer-reviewed journals, and he is a co-author of the book Understanding DNA, The Molecule and How It Works, 3rd edition, published in 2004. After this brief commercial break, chemist and DNA specialist Dr. Horace Drew will join John Burroughs and me to talk about how he was able to analyze strings of zeros and ones into words and numbers that include locations on Earth and even beyond our solar system to other stars.
Thank you, Linda. You're listening to Phenomenon Radio Live on KGRA-DB with Bentwaters experiencer John Burroughs and Emmy award-winning investigative journalist and Earth Files reporter and editor Linda Moulton Howe. Tonight, special guest Red Collie will join the show right after these messages. Stay with us. Thanks for joining us tonight here on Phenomenon Radio, everybody. The chat room is filling up. Thank you all for coming to the chat room. I'll be keeping my eye on it as the show progresses. And if you have some good questions you want to throw at Linda and John, you're more than welcome to send them in there. And if I can get to them, I will do so. We are here to kick off tonight's interview on Phenomenon Radio with special guest Red Collie. We're going to start with Linda Moulton Howe. Linda, welcome back.
Thank you, Race. And Dr. Drew, welcome to Phenomenon Radio. And I am thinking back to a day on January 7th of 2011. I'm even looking at my original notes when Mike Reed, your and my dear friend and the astronomer who had made telescopes and had worked at the University of Arizona, that you and Mike Reed were trying to deal with the Jim Penniston zeros and ones that were in a sort of long string with no designations of decimal points. And when Mike called me and I made these notes, he said, the problem is without having a designation of where the decimal points should go in these zeros and ones, and depending upon what category, whether it's in units of 6 or 7 or 8, you will have many interpretations. And I did an Earth Files that day that dealt with what Mike sent me, was looking at how many options in latitude and longitude locations that you could come up with from the just notebook zeros and ones in the string as they existed in the raw data. Since this is so important, could you begin with talking to John, me, Race, and the general audience about how you and Mike tackled these zeros and ones and why you think that your translation is perhaps the most accurate?
Well, thank you, Linda. When you wrote that in 2011, we only had the first 5 pages of the code out of 16. So at that point, Mike and I couldn't say anything because there were no decimal points in the latitudes and longitudes. But then later on, a few years later, we had all 16 pages. And having all 16 pages, the answer became very clear and unambiguous. And because what happens is it starts off saying, I'll just read it, it's easier to say, exploration of humanity, escape, escape, escape. Like an escape character, 8100 for the year 8100. And then it goes 52 and 7 digits north, 1 and 7 digits west. And that's repeated at the bottom of the message. So we know it's 52 in 7 digits. We know that's Woodbridge, England. And then the other latitudes and longitudes in the middle all have 6 digits past the decimal point. So by looking at all of them together, it becomes very clear how to read them without a decimal. All that the home coordinate has 7 past the decimal, and all the visiting coordinates have 6. And it's a very consistent set, and there's no ambiguity. I can tell you more, but I'll wait for your inquiry.
Yeah, I want to ask a couple of things, because if that top line is exploration of humanity, and then it was the ancient aliens producers and their computer tech who translated that binary code into the word origin, O-R-I-G-I-N. And when you and Mike were working on it in January, that was unclear. So let's say it is exploration of humanity and the word origin. 8100 doesn't have any meaning to us, right?
I'm looking at the whole code now. I don't know if you have it. I'll just read the whole code since it's so important. Exploration of humanity, escape, escape, escape. That's just a formatting. 8100, then 52, 7 digits north, 1, 7 digits west. That's close to Woodbridge, England with a small thing. Continuous for planetary advance. 4th coordinate, which is time. And then there's a very interesting phrase, continuoquence PR. Time is a continuous sequence of probabilities. Very, very important.
All right. I agree with you that the suggestion of relationships here in time is really important. But I have one more important question, because when Jim Penniston, John Burroughs, and I were with the Ancient Aliens production crew for the 30th anniversary in England, overlapping December 26th to 28th of 2010, which is before this report we're talking about right now, the producers had been working with a computer tech in Los Angeles, who they took the zeros and ones, and on that latitude, longitude, they came up with the mythological high Brazil west of Ireland in the Atlantic Ocean. And in talking with Mike about that, the astronomer, he was going into all of the options that you could come up with these binary decimals, and that could be one alternative, but that he thought and you thought that it actually made more sense that a machine that might be time traveling in Rendlesham Forest might be operating on self-activating software that was reacting to latitudes and longitudes on this planet or any planet that it was sent, and that Town Hall Center of Woodbridge, Suffolk, England would make more sense. But how do any of us know when we're looking at binary code translations, if there are all these options, when no binary decimal point is designated, everything is up for interpretation, right?
Well, not really. I think they should have hired a better expert. I didn't want to say that, but Mike would never say that now, because we have all 16 pages of the code. And it has to be self-consistent, the formatting. Mm-hmm. So what you have is, if you had that thing out in the middle of the ocean somewhere at latitude 13 degrees west, you'd have to have 520 degrees for latitude. That's impossible.
Oh, I see. I see what you mean, that you've at least got to have the latitude, longitude make logic of the Earth of where you are, even if you are exploring all kinds of latitudes and longitudes.
It has to be, the whole thing has to be self-consistent, So the whole thing has to be self-consistent. So that the home coordinate is 7 digits past the decimal point. At the beginning and end of the message, it's repeated. Origin year 8100. And all of the visiting coordinates are 6 digits past the decimal point. And the whole thing's consistent. Actually, if they look up, your listeners look up year 8100 on crop circle connector, you can see the whole binary code. I've translated there in a red collie, and it's very consistent. There's no doubt. I don't know what ancient aliens people did, but you have to spend your money more wisely before you hire experts. That's the most polite thing I can say, okay?
Well, what do you think 8100 means, and explain it for a general audience?
Well, either it's 8100 years from now or 8100 AD. I mean, that's the most likely two things. I don't know. They don't say. Eyes of your eyes. That means the eyes of your eyes. That means they're sending a team back, like the observers in Fringe, the TV show Fringe. They're sending a team back who are going to be the eyes for all the other people from the future to look at the past. Eyes of your eyes, origin 52 north, 1 west, origin year 8100. And they're visiting all these places, Greece, Mayan pyramids. They're going back in time to explore.
And do you know what is interesting, Horace, is we had on Lynn Buchanan, the remote viewer from the 1986 era, working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, in which one of his tests assigned was the Rendlesham Forest incident. And we had the original 1986 remote viewing paper that he did. And in it, from 1986, is the word incubator, that as he is entering into a triangular shaped something in the forest, he gets the remote viewer's impression of an incubator. And later in analysis, his interpretation was that this was a craft that was looking for the ability to implant or let down what was in the incubator and they were looking for places where what was in the incubator could grow and thrive, maybe on this planet and others. But that again would mean that that craft had Rendlesham Forest in that area programmed in which to look.
Yes, the interesting thing is there's one of the detail of the code which makes me think. People look and they say, well, maybe Jim Penniston made it up or something. But when you look at the details of the code, there are certain details, and you have to be very, very expert to sort of fabricate a code like this. And there's escape characters. There's the time as a continuous sequence of probabilities, something like Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang would say. Continuoquence PR. It's very powerful. And then, and also the coordinate for Woodbridge, England is given as west rather than east. So it's done twice. So you're really thinking about a mirror universe. You're really thinking they're not even in our time frame. They're in a parallel universe. So that's a bit extended, but that's what the Rendlesham code suggests.
Well, I want in another segment to talk with you, jumping to this year and the extraordinary Army sergeant who has now had an experience with a binary code that you and I have worked on. But before we go into that, I'd like to throw it to John.
Good evening, Red. How are you tonight?
Hi.
There's a couple things. I kind of get the gist of what you're saying. You totally believe that Jim Penniston received the binary code the way he said he did, and that this is an important message to mankind, correct?
I don't know, because I don't know him personally like you do. However, when you look at a binary code, you can see whether someone's done something stupid, like put an English text through an ASCII translator, or it's something authentic. You can tell if you're experienced, and this looks more authentic than somebody just making it up. I'll say that.
Okay. So based on the fact it's authentic, does it make sense that it would have been done probably by touching it like he did, or could that even have been implanted into him by some other means?
I don't know, John. I don't know. It's technology way beyond it's technology way beyond what we have. So I don't think anyone can say. You were there. You would know better than me.
Well, I'm trying to understand. It's clear to me that you guys did a lot of work on this. And let me take this from a different angle then. You feel this is an important message for man, correct?
There have been 4 of them altogether. Can I say? The reason this is convincing now, there have been 2 in crops and 2 by UFOs. We have 4 of them now by 2015, and they all look like they're being given by the same people. So it's really a lot to make all that up. You can't make up a crop picture, a big complicated one. So there's 4 messages in a total now, so that's really getting quite a large body of information rather than just one in 1980. Now we have quite a lot.
So we have we have one from 80, and then you have more messages going forward from 80, correct? Is that what you're saying?
And then Crabwood 2002 was the second one in crops.
Okay, can you go into those? Can you explain each one of those then, please?
If Linda wants to, yeah. And then we had 2 last summer, so we have 4 in total.
Right. And Collie, the first one that always got me was the very ancient Latin. I don't care what people said about it, but I remember back 1991 where that was laid out in the crop, and it was translated eventually as I oppose acts of craft and cunning, and it was related to a phrase having to do with the Greek Trojan horse, which is deception, and bearing gifts as deception. So now launching from that being in a wheat field, and that was at Milk Hill in 1991, that was the first translation. Can you pick up from that and go to what would have been the 2001? It was only about 3 weeks before the horror of 9/11 and what was happening in front of Chilbolton first. And then the next year, it moved east to Winchester and Crabwood. Can you talk about that whole sequence?
Well, the scientists of Earth by 2001 and 2002, I'd say by the end of the year 2002, it was proven scientifically that crop circles were made by fakers, and Linda brings these up. The first spectacular ones were in 2001. We had the Milk Hill crop picture, which everyone shows, this big spectacular thing. We had the transmitter message. We had Arecibo message near the Arecibo radio station in Chilbolton, England, with a face of Carl Sagan, what it looks like, and a sort of reply to his message there. And then in 2002, the binary code was at Crabwood, Winchester farmhouse, and it shows a gray alien from Orion with 3 stars, and it points toward a radio tower for BBC Winchester nearby, and it shows a CD disc, and there's long message, 1,400 binary bits, and part of the message says, "We oppose deception," and there's no doubt they're talking about the BBC. 100%, they're talking about BBC deceiving the British people. And there was a long message saying, "Beware of the gray aliens, believe there's good out there. We oppose deception." And they're telling us they use a wormhole. They're sending message by a conduit or a wormhole. So this is a very well-known and completely authenticated. That was the second message in 2002.
And I have from 2002 on August 19th an Earth Files that I did where we were getting the first binary code. And the message then that came is, "Beware the bearers of false gifts," which would echo the 1991 Milk Hill in the ancient Latin, "I oppose acts of craft and cunning," and it was interpreted as related to the Greek Trojan horse. So now we are at 2002, and this is after 9/11 and the horror. And beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises, much pain, but still time. And then people couldn't understand a damaged word. There is good out there. We oppose deception. And the way it was interpreted was the binary signal that the telegraph machines used to use to close out the conduit.
It wasn't really a damaged word. There was a secondary code. It's called digital steganography. And there was a second code overlaid with the first. The word was never damaged. That was just like, it said, "Believe there is good out there." And when there's a second code, and to my understanding, the second code said 50 years between 2002 and August. If you go back 50 years, that's exactly when the gray aliens were flying over the White House, the alien attacks in July and August of 52. And they've got a picture of a gray alien there. So it wasn't a damaged word. That's just some debunker saying that. There was what's called digital steganography, where they have a second binary code overlaid with the first. And it told us 50, that was what that meant.
And Holly, you, of all the people that I know, are aware that we are dealing with an intelligence that is able to place an arc from one year to the next year to the next year, in which the formation can be completely interrelated, but it takes 2 or 3 years for it all to come down. And that was true about Chilbolton. And in fact, when the Chilbolton Observatory, which was its job, was beaming out to star clusters and receiving signals, that when the first airplane finally flew over the big wheat field in front of the Chilbolton Observatory in August of 2001. This is 3 weeks before the horror of 9/11. It was a pilot that had been called because this is amazing. I did an interview with the director of Chilbolton, and he said that people working inside the observatory had noticed what they called a shadow in the wheat out beyond the observatory windows, and nobody went out there, and no one called anyone to fly over. It was some serendipity that a pilot flew over on August 20th. The face, which we now know was the shadow that people were seeing from the observatory, it was first observed on the 14th of August. On the 20th, the pilot flies over and reports not only the face in the wheat, but there was this enormous rectangle of binary code stretched out right up to the front door almost of the observatory. Like, if you can't see the face, we're going to do this. And I'm looking at it right now, that it was a perfect line by line answer, if you want to use that word, to the November 16th, 1974 Arecibo radio telescope transmission by Carl Sagan and Drake. And when you come down from numbers 1 through 10 and the atomic numbers for elements in our biology and the sugars in the nucleotides of DNA, and getting down to a humanoid figure and a binary that's given it as the height of 6 feet. And right below was a solar system in which the sun is on the right, and the third planet over was raised up right under the human feet. And right below there was a pictogram or a diagram of the Arecibo transmitter that we, Carl Sagan and Drake, used in December 1974. Now we're at August 20th, 2001, before 9/11, and it comes down to they have their own depictions line by line, and it looks like a little figure with a huge head, maybe from a planet with 4 moons. But here's the kicker. At the bottom, where we had the Arecibo diagram of the transmitter in what we sent out in 74, at the bottom of what was in the binary wheat was exactly the gigantic pattern that had appeared in front of the Chilbolton Observatory exactly 1 year before in August 2000. So it went transmitter in one summer, followed by the face in binary code the next summer. Then came 9/11, and then 2002 was the gray and the big disk of binary at Crabwood near Winchester in August of 2002.
That's right. And I'd like to talk about the DNA part of that message, because I know DNA better than anybody on earth. I did the first X-ray structure of right-handed DNA, one of the two of left-handed, so nobody knows DNA better than me. The SETI guys, like Drake and who's the other SETI guys, they say, oh, the crop structure wasn't authentic because the DNA doesn't make any sense. If you go to the radio, you can see Drake. This is the danger of an astronomer going into something like DNA and think he knows something. He doesn't know anything. I'm just going to say flat out, those SETI people are wrong. Scientifically, the SETI people in America are wrong. I'll seldom use such strong language. And the reason is it made excellent sense what was drawn in crops, the various forms of DNA. Carl Sagan was at Caltech. His first wife, Lynn Margulis, was in our group. Dickerson, where I was working, she was doing a sabbatical there for a while. I'd see Sagan in the lunchroom. He'd sit next to us, so he's not like some mystery person. And he went to the Caltech, when he was making his message, he went to the Caltech DNA guys and said, what should I put in the middle? And how many base pairs do we have in the genome? And they told him something, the number was wrong. So the original Arecibo message had the wrong number in the middle. But he told them they had 10 base pairs and he had double helix. So that's what he put in the radio message in 1974. Now, when it came back in crops in 2001, as you described, right outside a radio telescope, first of all, the aliens couldn't respond to the center because it was wrong. Sagan had given them the wrong message. But they put a new form of DNA. They showed our form of DNA on one side with 2 strands with 10 bases each. On the other strand, they showed 1 strand with 6 bases in a helical turn. Mm-hmm. Now, Drake and the guys don't know biochemistry, so they say that's nonsense, some faker made it. But that's just because they don't know anything about DNA. And there are astronomers just talking about, if I talked about expert astronomy, I would probably be wrong too. The form with 6 bases on the other side is called 2', 5' DNA. There are 2 evolutionary forms of DNA. One is called 3', 5'. The other is called 2', 5', and these are found in all origin of life experiments like Leslie Orgel in San Diego and RNA splicing in the origin of life, chemical evolution. So typically when you make DNA from chemicals, you get both forms called the 2', 5' and the 3', 5', how the sugars all connect with one another. So what the aliens did, or whoever made it, they sent both forms and said, here are the 2 evolutionary forms of DNA in our galaxy, one on one side, one on the other. So it's a completely authentic message. So all the objections to that thing, I'm going to say, whatever people listening, while the astronomers are wrong because they don't know about biochemistry or DNA. The message is, whoever made it, it's a completely authentic message.
And Kali, what would you say, just from what you know about DNA and looking at what we'll call it the alien signal in the wheat, where we had the 6-foot humanoid, this is like a little character, like something small. And what do you interpret what they put in as their glyph for what they are and that peculiar DNA? What would you imagine they were like?
I don't know about the size of the character, but the DNA they showed is just like what chemical evolutionists. My boss at Caltech was the leading evolutionist in America, Dick Dickerson. He was the leading expert on chemical evolution. So, of course, I learned the subject in Scientific American articles, and I knew all the guys in Cambridge. So what they showed was perfectly consistent with what we know about chemical evolution. I don't know about the size of the alien or the planetary system, but it's just a second form of DNA. It's used in interferon, antiviral interferon defense systems. That's what it's also used. Like you've got in your body, it'll trigger antiviral defenses if your body sees any of that. And Francis Crick said he wondered, why do we have 2', 5'? Why don't we have that? Why do we have 3', 5'? And Francis Crick thought it was a frozen accident that we have one, not the other. So you can easily imagine other races in the galaxy having the other one. So when this message comes back, it's perfectly authentic, exactly what an alien would send us. That doesn't mean I can't prove aliens made it, but the content of the message regarding the DNA is perfectly consistent with people who have an advanced knowledge of biochemistry.
Well, Paul the Gay, remember him? God bless him wherever he is, what dimension now. He was the only person who got down on his hands and knees, both in the day and the night with a flashlight, and was drawing in a notebook, trying to get every little detail in the binary code rectangle. And he emailed me, and he ended up, I think, publishing some of this. But he said in communication to me that on the ground that there were 6 columns in the binary element sequence compared to 5 columns in the 1974 Arecibo transmission. And so whoever did this code formation inserted an extra element, and then he broke it down to what he thought was inserted as an extra element and said, if you look up the atomic number for 14, which is in a sequence that he had put in his notebook as being the extra one, you get silicon. That is very interesting because lots of people have speculated that if there are alien life forms, which are not carbon-based life forms, as everything is on Earth, then about the only other element in the entire periodic table that could possibly support life is silicon-based life forms. You might disagree with that, but that was one of the written publications about that binary code at Chilbolton back in 2001.
Yeah, that's completely true. They showed hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and also they showed silicon as another element of life. That's completely true what you say.
And that's Paul Vegay's work. And it was raising these complex issues that if in a wheat field in front of an observatory, Chilbolton in UK, that was devoted to sending and receiving signals, and that this might be an answer to the Drake and Sagan message in 74, it was essentially, don't you think, Reds, almost made fun of instead of taken seriously by the astronomy world?
Yes, that's 100%. And then more recently, just to catch you up to 2015, Paul Jacobs, who does the crop pictures in England, the leading ground investigator there now, another one appeared like last year next to a radio telescope. So he was very impressed by it. He went to knock on the observatory and said, "Have you seen this yet?" And they just don't want to know about it. So there have been 6 crop pictures near radio telescopes. There was another one in Germany. Thousands of people go to it. Six crop pictures now near radio telescopes. And the SETI people said, "Oh, it's all fakers with boards," and all of them look perfectly authentic. So they just don't want to know. You know, their eyes are closed.
John.
Red, you've gone over some of this stuff, but what are they trying to tell us then? What if they obviously did this happen before 80? So is there messages prior to 80, 1980? And you said there's been other messages. You've studied all this. You're looking at all this. What are they trying to tell us? And you say aliens, or you're not sure. Where is the communications possibly coming from, and what are they trying to tell us?
Well, we have 2 sources of communications. One is by the UFOs, like you saw, of course. I've seen a UFO close up when I was young. And the other is by the crop circles, which may be by wormhole communication. So that's the means of communication. They may not even be here. And you ask, why don't they come land? To me, it looks like they're fixing our timeline. To me, it looks like they don't really want to interfere and land and come down, but they're interested in like adjusting the flow of history and time and history, especially with these latest 2 messages. Like the flow of...
Are they trying to communicate? That's what I'm trying to get at. Are they trying to communicate with us? Are they trying to warn us? What exactly they're trying to do? And I want to make a little statement on that. I think people need to have an open mind towards this, because if you go back in history, you know, we couldn't sail around the world because it was flat. We couldn't fly. We couldn't go to space. So you have to take this with an open mind, and you have to try to listen to what the information coming in and where people are going with this. And that's what I'm trying to understand right here. And I think a lot of people are. There's stuff that's going on. We've got crop circles. We had the binary message in 80. We've had messages further on. What based on your work on all this, what are they trying to do besides fix the timeline? Do you have any
I think we need
ideas?
to move forward. I think we needed to move forward, as Linda said, to discuss the 2015 results, and then it'll become more clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we've got about 10 minutes before break. Let's start then.
All right, we can start it and carry it on over the break, because I really do think this is a significant event. And it goes back to mid-September 2015, not very long ago. I contacted an Army sergeant from Hunter Army Airfield near Savannah, Georgia, and he had an encounter with a large round aerial craft while moving with his family to Colorado Springs to begin work at Fort Carson, and they had been at Hunter Airfield near Savannah. To protect his Army career, he's asked me not to use his real name, so I call him CJ, or Sergeant CJ. And I've talked to him literally for about 3.5 or 4 hours, and I've talked with his wife. And she is in many ways more upset about what has happened, but he's the one who ended up with whatever this binary code phenomenon is running through his mind. Now, they both describe starting off in a truck on the early evening of June 28th, 2015. It was a little after sunset, and it was with their 2 children, a dog and a cat. And they were set to travel when it was kind of cooler in the summer and less traffic after sundown. And he had bought a brand new GPS, and he was very familiar with working with GPS in his work in the Army. Part of his work is to identify aerial vehicles in the sky, no matter what they are, to estimate size, color, equipment. That's part of what he does in the Army. He programmed their GPS for the final destination to be Colorado Springs, Colorado, going through Atlanta and onward northwest. Atlanta should have been a 4.5 hour drive from Savannah, and they expected to be checked into a motel by midnight. But something unknown diverted their truck north to the small town of Wadley, Georgia, without either Sergeant CJ or his wife being even aware that suddenly in the dark on the road that they were not going toward Atlanta. They did not know this diversion had happened. It was a very clear night. He said you could see stars, and the couple did not understand where a thick fog suddenly came and surrounded their truck for a few minutes. Both he and his wife were commenting on where did this fog come from? And then a bright white light in the sky swooped down to about 200 feet above the road. CJ pulled the truck over in shock, and from his Army training, he estimated that the big craft was about 820 feet in diameter. That's about 3 football fields wide, with odd, sparkling, pulsing, use that word light, ejecting from the front and the back of the huge round craft, but it was not emitting from the surface of the craft. It was as if somehow it was out in the front with gaps of the air in between whatever was being projected back in front. He could hear a low pulsing hum, and he was very puzzled by 5 dark symbols below the midline of that big disc. When the big craft just disappeared in front of them, it didn't move, it just disappeared, he remembered that he did look at his digital watch, and it was between 1:28, 1:29 a.m., and he remembered that. But he realized he was confused, he felt weak and disoriented, and so did his wife. He started the truck, and they got to a gas station, but when he tried to get out of the truck, he realized his legs felt like wet noodles and he could not even walk. And then he learned they were in a small town called Wadley, north of the route that they should have stayed on in Atlanta. And when I first talked to him, he said, I'm going to send you the image. He said, what I'm sending you, Linda, is what scares me. I couldn't sleep at all after that first night of the craft. And then the next night we got to Paducah, Kentucky, and we got into a Motel 6. And I know I was going to sleep and I was having nightmares. I was seeing gray beings. And then, Linda, I woke up and I'm leaning against the door jamb in the bathroom. And in my left hand, I have the back of the receipt of the Motel 6. And I have a pen in my right hand. And there are all these squares and lines. And he said, I'll send you the image to see what you can learn. And this is where we pick up with a parallel to Jim Penniston, because Red, you have helped in the translation of yet another series of just no designations in squares and ones. And what I'm wondering is, I've set up the story, and Race, I wonder if we could go to the break now, and when we come back, have Horace go into this amazing case and the binary code that has been translated from this that has matching words and similar thoughts to the Jim Penniston translation and some of what has been in the crop formations.
That wraps up the first hour of tonight's interview with very special guest Red Colley. Stay right where you are, folks. Hour 2 continues right after these messages from your choice for UFO Paranormal Talk Radio on the internet. We're KGRAradio.com. Don't go anywhere.
And Red Colley, Dr. Horace Drew, I find that this case, we're calling it the Wadley, Georgia case, because this is where the husband, Sergeant CJ, his wife, in the truck with the kids asleep and the cat and the dog, encountered this huge craft that had 5 symbols right below the midline, and that it took him through the first night of agitation to the next night where he went into fitful sleep and found himself coming into beta consciousness, standing in the Motel 6 bathroom, holding the Motel 6 receipt turned around to the white backside, and seeing that he had the pen in his right hand and that this back of this receipt was filled with squares and ones, just like the Penniston zeros and ones from 36 years before in Rendlesham, but he used zeros and ones. Now, Sergeant CJ has written, as he put at the end of it, WTF, exclamation point. What is happening here? What have I done? And I send this to you to say, can you see if there's any binary code translation? And I did it to two other people who also got the same translations. Can you now unfold how you approached that back of that receipt with squares and ones?
It's really easy, Linda. If you know binary code, you just read it and look for a consistent 8-bit reading frame, just like you would in DNA. You look for a protein reading frame. You just look in the like proteins, when you have DNA, there's no stops in DNA. You just read the letters and just do the same thing with the binary code to look for a consistent, meaningful message.
And
that's how it's done.
Explain or read now what you came to and others confirmed. And then let's talk a little bit about this. And I have a piece to add here. So go to the translation.
It's 5 whole sentences. And so each sentence has a slightly different meaning. So if you remember, the Penniston Code said exploration of humanity for planetary advance. That's how it started from 1980. Now this new 2015 code, it starts off saying continuous protection of humanity. And then it gives some numbers, some latitude and longitude. Now it's interesting, let's just do it as a long. The latitude is 49.27 north. The longitude is 11.5 east. My first thought would be decimal degrees, but that was wrong. It actually refers to 49 degrees 27 minutes north, 11 degrees 5 minutes east, which is the town center of Nuremberg, Germany.
Yes, exactly. And when I did this on Google Earth myself a week or so ago, and I had not seen your email saying that you had come to the conclusion that it was Nuremberg. It had changed, and it had seemed like it was in, I think it was called Hohenberg, Germany. And so now I have put this in with the numbers, and I end up coming into this farm and realizing that Nuremberg is the closest large place. And then when I began doing history on Nuremberg, I am taken back to 1561, April 14th. And there was an article in the Nuremberg Gazette that has been reprinted in the website where I was. And what it said about what had happened on April 14th, 1561, that was commemorated for all ages in the famous woodcut that has the sun in the sky surrounded by what appears to be battling spheres and rods of many types. And the Nuremberg Gazette said, quote, "The dreadful apparition filled the morning sky with cylindrical shapes from which emerged black, red, orange, and blue-white spheres that darted about. Between the spheres there were crosses with the color of blood. This frightful spectacle was witnessed by numerous men and women. Afterwards, a black spear-like object appeared. In the woodcut, it is at the bottom below all of the war of spheres around the sun." And what I began to wonder and thought I would ask you tonight on Phenomena Radio is, Collie, if the translation that has the latitude and longitude at the end, as Penniston's 36 years ago had exploration of humanity, escape, 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 or origin 8100, followed by a latitude, longitude. That latitude, longitude was relating to the exploration of humanity intelligence. So if you jump to Wadley, Georgia, and the first line is continuous protection of humanity, and the latitude, longitude is Nuremberg, Germany, what if the implication is that there was a war between friendlies and unfriendlies in 1561, and that some of the friendlies and unfriendlies are still at war on this planet now?
Yeah, it could be either that they had a war in Nuremberg, or maybe maybe they're humans from our own future and they live in Nuremberg. I don't think the code really tells us. Could be maybe they're time travelers. Nuremberg has a great university of physics, so it could be both.
But there is something that seems eerie when you realize that this latitude, longitude we discover, and that Nuremberg, in terms of UFOs, has this very dramatic 1561 event.
Yeah, there was a battle through time, just like in that Star Trek episode. Remember that? Where Captain Kirk goes back to fight the Borg in the past. They had some battle there in the past. There was a UFO battle in that where these people live, who they are, that can't be sure. It's just like you said, there was spheres like you see in the crop circles, crosses. So there was some sort of warfare between two species there.
And may be going on today. And as you go forward, read the rest of your translation.
So that was just the first line. The next four lines are very, very interesting, which is why I didn't want to spend too long. Incidentally, Stephen Hawking, before I forget, has postulated, Stephen Hawking believes time travel is possible, and he's wondering why they haven't come to visit him in Cambridge. And he postulates a chronology protection agency. And that's just who these people seem to be. They're continuously protecting time, the time history of humanity. They're like Stephen Hawking's chronology protection agency. So he says, where's Santa Claus? Yes, this is Santa Claus. So there's very much of what the physicists would expect. The second line.
Yeah, whoever they are, they really care that we know. And what does it say?
Continuous protection of humanity. Chronology. Okay. The second line, it says, expose hidden knowledge to all citizens.
Right.
And that's interesting for two reasons. First, the Wadley fellow who was there confirmed that it was the military, whoever, our governments have all this secret knowledge, technology about energy, whatever, propulsion. And if it got out to the civilian scientists, like the guys in the labs, the companies, the universities, we could go forward much faster than if the military kept it secret. And this is what that's instructing them to do. And the interesting thing about this, you say, well, John said it might be a fake. They put a little fun thing in front of the C, soft C, like the French C. Citizens is a soft C, whereas continuous is a hard C. And that's written in the binary code. And finally I realized nobody on Earth does that today. Nobody writes a soft C different than a hard C in English. But
right.
Whoever wrote this, if you use a soft C like Sedella, or is different than continuous. So this is a very convincing little detail.
And that is not a mistake. I'm looking at it in the binary because you provided the binary, and the binary accommodates that little cedilla before citizens.
It's just like Francais. Francais is a soft French is a soft C.
Right.
So that's actually, it's not a mistake, and no faker would do that because you could put it through a program, and nobody program would do that, and it'd have to be a very sophisticated fake to do it. Someone who's really very, very clever. It's called an accent grave. So that's a very convincing detail for John and you others,
And then the next sentence
says advancement imperative for planetary survival. So the Rendlesham code from 1980 said continuous for planetary advance.
Right.
This new one in 2015 says advancement imperative for planetary survival. So we've gone from helping us a little to say, okay, guys, this is it. Either you advance or you're stuffed. And that's what this code, that's what is 2015. We've gotten to that point. It's a very imperative message.
I have a question. I'm sorry to break in. All right. Well, how are we supposed to advance?
Well, can we get through this, John, and then go? Because the next...
No, that's fine. When John's here, obviously by exposing the hidden knowledge to all citizens is how we advance. So expose hidden knowledge to all citizens, advancement imperative. So by taking the knowledge away from the Area 51 guys, whoever the Boyd Bushman guys, taking all that, giving it to the guys in universities, the companies, Russia, China, all around the world, scientists should access. So instead of fighting these little tribal wars over little bits of territory, we all advance as a species to clear the ecological crisis, the energy crisis. We don't use coal and gas. I mean, we could advance that way, couldn't we?
Oh, I agree. Okay.
So I think that's and I think the guy, what's interesting, I think the witness, as you said, he didn't know what the binary code meant, and he said almost the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
So he had no idea what the code meant, and apparently he got an English communication that said the same as that, which I was quite impressed by, since he didn't know what the code meant. So,
yeah, then go on to the next line, which is quite fascinating.
now this next line, we've had three messages to worry about the gray aliens. The first was in 2002, beware the bearers of false gifts, and it shows a picture of a gray alien from the Orion Nebula. That was 2002 in crops. The second message was actually drawn in crops 6 days before this UFO contact happened. In Italy, they had a message in Latin, sort of humorously, Timeo et ferentes, beware of extraterrestrials bearing gifts. And it appeared in Turin, Italy on June 23rd that morning, big spectacular crop picture, right where the Pope was visiting. So it was a lockdown, no one could go there. And I translated that one around the 28th because they didn't get good photographs. People couldn't fly over it. It was a lockdown, and I didn't get the photographs for about 4 or 5 days. So 6 hours after I translate this, Timeo et ferentes, we get the Georgia code, which says the same thing. So there's a 6-hour difference in Georgia and Turin, which sort of stunned me. I thought, oh, must be coordinated. So the Wadley code says, beware of Orion 1350.3 and Z Reticuli 39.170.
Those are numbers for?
Those are the light years from Earth of each star system of the gray aliens. The Orion Greys live 1350.3 light years from Earth. The Zeta Reticuli aliens live 39.170 light years from Earth. Now, what's interesting is the code gives one more digit of accuracy than what we know on Earth today. So if you look at this up, the astronomer will say it's 1350 plus or minus 1. The binary code says 1350.3. Zeta Reticuli, if you look on the web, you'll say 39.17 light years from Earth. The code says 39.170. So whoever made this, if these numbers are correct, knows the distance to those stars 10 times more accurately than we do.
And the precedent to tying Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 to something that is gray is Betty and Barney Hill, 1961, New Hampshire, the White Mountains. And that is the famous story where afterwards in hypnosis, she sketched a star map that she had seen in 3 dimensions on the craft under the guidance of some gray being. And it was Marjorie Fish, the amateur astronomer, who in another few years would have taken Betty Hill's star map and had compared it to what we knew about stars in 50 light years from the Earth. And it turned out that when Marjorie Fish did her work, it ended up being published in Astronomy magazine, and that this was the beginning of some of these particular stars even being discovered, Kali, because some of it was not known back in 1961. And when it did become known, it matched Betty Hill's star map and the beings, what she had drawn, the double system the gray being had pointed to in the star map as this was route. This was a shipping or trade route that these gray beings were doing. And when Marjorie Fish did the star, we'll call it the 3-dimensional star map, to see what she could find from the Betty Hill, it turned out that was Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 that was defined by the gray aliens to Betty Hill herself as being one of their major trade routes, and they were grays.
Yes, so we have 6, I guess we have these 4 binary codes, we have Betty Hill, we have the bag shot case, we have about 6 different messages now. So you can't have fakers making 6 different messages over 50 years around the world, okay? In crops, UFOs all around the world. So it's just way too much to be dismissed at this point. I mean, just like so far. So I don't know why the other scientists, they don't pay attention, are just closed-minded at this point.
And I'm curious how you interpret avoid signal messages sent, the last line in the Wadley binary code, because it could be interpreted as avoid signal messages sent on Earth or avoid signal messages sent, say, in Arecibo or out into the cosmos from Earth. What is your perspective?
I didn't know. I was a bit confused by that last line. Talk about cryptic messages. It says avoid signal messages sent. It has these little brackets around signal. And then later, I thought, I don't know what this means. Later, I found out that's called Cosmic OS format. And that's the format they use with these little brackets. They're planning to send radio messages out into space. They're called the active SETI people. So you'd think it would say, don't send any radio message out into space. You wonder why space is quiet. Maybe space is quiet for a reason. The other races aren't alerting other races the fact that they're there. You just wouldn't do it. It would be a stupid thing to do, like the Indians saying, come on, white men, come in here, So, and then also apparently your Wadley fellow said the same thing without knowing the code. So I think it's a warning against active SETI, which is what the fairly arrogant astronomers are planning. And Hawking is also warned, don't send messages out into space. So,
Hawking
some aliens...
Hawking is warned. Elon Musk of Tesla has warned. And Bill Gates, those three guys in just 2015 alone have said we shouldn't be sending messages out into the cosmos unless we know who's receiving on the other end.
That's right. And the final thing, which I haven't mentioned to you before, Linda, I'm trying to understand the code. There still could be hidden messages in all these things. I haven't done all of the interpretation. There still could be more I don't understand, in the crops and the thing. And one interesting thing is there are 5 lines, 5 sentences. And your friend said it's the Council of 5. Now, whether there really are 5 alien races, it's a strange coincidence, that there are 5 alien races protecting us and have 5 lines of the message. But I can't find any more code. I would tell you if I could.
And that is almost consistent with the Ronald Reagan alleged briefing of March 6th to 8th, 1981 at Camp David that came out in the Serpo material. And I had shown that transcript of the alleged briefing to Ronald Reagan by the director of the CIA with NSA, DIA, and NRO and others present to somebody who does know Washington. And they said that is a legitimate transcript. And in it, in that dialogue where they finally tell Reagan that there are 5 different civilizations that they are dealing with in the cosmos that are in the extraterrestrial category, 4 of which are quote unquote friendly, as Lynn Buchanan would say. The 5th is considered hostile. It's referred to as an HAV, hostile alien visitor. And when you think about friendlies and unfriendlies, if in 1981 March that the government was breaking down for Reagan 5, today they may have a list of 10, and it may be why there could be a council of 5 who is trying to help Earth.
I don't know, but these messages in 2015 indicate there's definitely a war of Earth going on. And as John asked me why to do it, he said, why are they messages now? So we've got 2 messages from 2015. In crops, there's warning us about an alien Trojan horse. The aliens are going to pull a Trojan horse attack on us. There's no doubt that's what the message is. It's they're warning us like you'd warn the Trojans about the Trojan horse. And then here in this 2015 UFO message, they say they're protecting us, and they said what they want us to do. John said, what do you want to do? What can we do? Expose hidden knowledge to all citizens. We have to break the cover-ups. Obama has to break Area 51, Cameron. And you just have to tell everybody, stop lying, okay? And if you have an energy source in Area 51, let the guys in the university work on it. Let the guys of the Bell Labs work on it. Don't just keep it in one little couple scientists. And that'll make it go much faster. And then advancement imperative for planetary survival. That's what we have to do now to survive. It's not because we want to do it. If we have to, they're telling us now, if we don't do that, we're not going to survive. And that's the hard bottom line, okay? And they're warning us about the 2 species of gray alien. So that's the bottom line for 2015. There may be more messages, but that's all I can tell you right now, okay?
And the last words from Sergeant CJ to me in our very long recorded interview is he said that he felt, and these are his words, all of this needs to be exposed. And all bright minds need to be involved in future advancement of what we have and what we need to increase our technical I guess, our technical side. I'm not a good speaker, but we need to be able to improve at a faster rate, that it's necessary that we expand and allow all minds to come together to get things done quicker. And I said, or what is going to happen? And he answered, whatever is going to happen might negatively affect us. And that's the question. Are we on some sort of a cusp in a timeline where if all the world knew all of this right now, Collie, it might change time forever?
Yeah, they're trying to fix the timeline. Something happened to our timeline. I don't want to upset people, but we're not in the original timeline we were really supposed to be in. Maybe it was 9/11. I have a hunch 9/11 didn't happen originally. Maybe somehow outside forces caused it. And now these people are trying to push the boat back to course. Just imagine, for example, today, instead of thinking about economic advantage, if they had some magnetic energy device or fusion device, suppose the Chinese civilian scientists got it to get rid of all coal and nuclear, and all Chinese scientists had access to research on it. How fast, of course, we would lose economically at our USA, but how fast the human race would go ahead. You can just imagine that, can't you? And they consider the Chinese enemies. My son has a Chinese daughter-in-law. Those people aren't your enemies. They're competitors, but they're not violent enemies. Well, I mean, if the USA insists on being number one nation, everybody else below, you're going to generate competition that way. But if you consider it as a large world where people can be partners like equals and help dominate one another, then there's no reason you can't have all the Chinese scientists, all the Russian scientists generating peaceful energy technology, all the American scientists in the universities getting access to all the secret stuff, which there must be vast amounts of secret stuff, and all working on it. And instead of having a few guys at Area 51, how many scientists? 100? You'll have 10,000 working on it. And we can advance much faster. And that's the primary message they're giving us right now. We have to upgrade ourselves faster before something is going to happen.
Well, okay, we have to upgrade ourselves. We have to work on this. But ultimately, besides working together, what exactly are they looking for us to do? I mean, and are you, based on the data you've looked at in crop circles and these messages, saying there's something we have to do, or we're no longer going to exist and they can't help us? Can you elaborate on that?
I think it's an interaction between time travelers and us. If you're time travelers, alien or human, and you want to go change the timeline on planet Earth, you have to make people behave differently. You can do all sorts of things, talk to somebody, telepathy, give messages, but eventually the humans have to start changing in a way which will be conducive for their own survival. So eventually you've got to make a public message and said, hey, you guys, you need to do this. And that's why part of the reason I'm on the radio today. So they're actually appealing to us, like in the TV. Have you seen the TV show Fringe?
Yeah.
So the observer, September, Walter goes and says, September goes to Walter, the scientist who's like me, and he's also from Jacksonville. And he says, Walter, I need your help. So the humans and our scientists have to stop being afraid of humans from the future or wherever, and we have to interact a little more to ensure our own survival. I think that's definitely a message.
Okay, and one of the things that we were talking about on the break was why binary over, English, Russian, or whatever. Why wouldn't they send different messages to different countries in our own language? And you talked a little bit about that, and then also you said there was a message within the binary that Penniston got that pretty much shows that there's no way he could have done that himself. So can you go into both of that for us, please?
Well, there have been a lot of messages, like you just said, Betty Hill and all that. There was another one, why they're using binary code. Well, first of all, computer code is universal. So if you do that, anyone on Earth can read it. You're not writing in one language. So anyone on Earth can read ASCII computer code. Secondly, sometimes they give telepathic messages in English. There was one at Bagshot Heath in 1985, England, and it also talked about advancement, just like this one, advancement 50%, whatever. Some of the same people. And everybody ignored it because it was in English. It wasn't in binary code. So there's two good reasons. The universal nature of the binary code, so everyone can read it. And also it gets more attention. Two good reasons to write a binary code. Where if you just put letters in a crop, people will say it's an advertisement or something like that. The second question you asked, John, was about the Penniston code. And one of the most interesting things there's a part they couldn't read. Your alien advisors man couldn't read. It says continuoquence PR. The reason is it's not a word that exists in English in our today. Continuoquence PR. And it means continuous sequence of probabilities. Fourth coordinate time is a continuoquence of PR. That's what the code says. Time is a continuous sequence of probabilities. So if I do something today, it interacts non-linearly with what will happen tomorrow. It's not linear. It keeps changing. So if I P1 times P2 times P3, it's not commutative, like they say in quantum mechanics. It's not commutative. So the time travelers know that time will change non-linearly. Now, I seriously doubt that John Penniston could come up with this phrase. I mean, just like beyond anything. Okay. Continuoquence PR. So there are details like that in all of these codes, which make it, it's not just something punched into an ASCII machine, somebody writes a message. There are all sorts of convincing details.
Okay. And so kind of to summarize your investigation, and maybe, you know, if you want to take it a little deeper, is that they're telling us time is running out, that we need to change and start working together, which, I mean, Red, if you're an outsider looking in, there's been a push all around the world by the nations to unite under, I guess, the UN as a one world order, a new world order, which even, you know, I call him Old Man Bush. He pushed that, you know, back in the 90s, and that has met so much resistance from, you know, around the world, especially in America. So basically what you're saying is they're telling us it's time we start working together, or our is about up. Is that kind of a good summary of what you're getting out of all this?
There's never been anything, even a little bit, about a one world government. That's never been mentioned. The New World Order has never been mentioned. The other messages they've given are much pain, but still time, and that was 2002. So it's 13 years later, much pain, but still time. There was another message in Crops on the 70th anniversary of D-Day, which said no more war. And that looked very authentic. It showed little uranium fissions and Morse code, no more war. So in peace, other messages, peace, you know. So these are just the longest messages. So we're getting messages in Crops all the time. It could be one tomorrow. There was just a crop circle in Argentina 2 days ago, 2 in Brazil and 2 in Argentina. And they look, 2 of them at least look authentic. So we're getting messages downloaded all the time. And this is in the end. If we got 2 messages in 2015, we're going to get a message in 2016. So we must be at a very cusp point now where they're going to have to intervene a little more closely. They're getting more and more interventional, you know. Right.
And do you feel, okay, maybe I need to put it differently. What countries or groups of scientists do you feel that are maybe starting to take this more seriously? Is there anybody out there that really is? Or is this just a few people like you that are out there trying to work on this, and all you do is run into roadblock after roadblock?
Right now, the only scientists taking it seriously are the debunking agencies. If people don't know this, they should know that the USA, Italy, England at least, France, hire debunkers to lie about crop pictures all over the web. So even if I put the truth, I'm swamped. 1 truth, 99 lies. Very sophisticated debunking to stop people from knowing about this. And I know who the people are. I'm not going to mention for liability reasons, but I know who all the people are whose job it is to stop people from knowing about this. So given that tremendous effort, most scientists are just afraid to buck the system. Because I'm retired. The active ones are afraid because they'll just lose their jobs. And that's a very severe penalty for going into UFOs. They just can't do it, even if they want to. Privately they will, but not publicly.
Okay, but if you look at crop circles, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a UFO. You would think the science world would want to really figure out where they're really coming from. And I understand people out there, you know, somebody created 1 or 2 or how many they did. Then right away there's a big story about that saying, see, they're all fake. But it's clear that you can't go that route. I mean, there's stuff out there you can't explain. Why take away the UFO part? Why won't mainstream science look closer at why these are appearing every year in certain areas and everything else other than the UFO factor? Wouldn't there be a pressing need to know, especially, and I'm trying to understand, maybe people need to try to understand a little bit better, why would you hold this information back if it really does have something to do with how mankind's going to, evolve, or if we're even going to make it.
Well, there's been a UFO cover-up, crop circle cover-up since 1955, as Linda knows, and this is part of it. Secondly, if you're a scientist and you're in any job anywhere, company or whatever, you have peer review for your grants by the agency. So if you want to keep your job or have any researchers or get grant money, even if you're very successful, for example, at Stanford or any of these places, you put your grant in and you get anonymous peer review. So if they want to kill you, even if you're successful, and say you're doing genomics successfully, and then you want to do a little UFO on the side, analyze some sample, like this guy at Stanford, and then they'll shut you down right away, because if you continue that, your grant's gone and you're fired. You won't ever be a scientist again. So they have complete control of all the working scientists that way. You don't understand how it works. It's just like the military, I guess. So they're interested, but they're afraid. They just can't do it because of their own livelihoods.
Right. But why would the government, and I'm trying to take the UFO factor out of this right now, why would the government want to hold back the study of crop circles? Because how do we know for sure where they're coming from? So why wouldn't they want to have some kind of study being done on where are they coming from and what they could mean, or even if they could help us? I think that's what I'm trying to zero in on.
Collie?
I'd say
Collie, there's one thing to put in here, is going back before any of the government counters with Doug and Dave and all of the lies that this was all man-made. Let's go back to the end of the 80s and the early 90s. I am one of the people who saw the lights moving on top of Woodborough Hill and down in a field, and there were so many people seeing those strange, mysterious lights before, during, or after crop formations. And that phenomena itself, as I understand it, is something that the UK and the American governments wanted to chase out of the fields for reasons unknown. Can you talk about that?
I haven't seen any lights myself. Other people have. Many other people have photographed the orbs over Nuremberg. Lots of friends of mine have seen or photographed. I've seen a UFO, a saucer, but I've never seen anything in the crops. But if you go over there to England, I was just there, the British people are just terrified, and they're brainwashed, and 99.9% of them believe what the government says. They're terrified to believe anything the government says. Disagree with the government, they're terrified. You can't even go in the pub like at the White Horse, the guys. I'm not even allowed to talk about it in the White Horse. I can't say, Tara says, I like it, but we can't offend the customers. So, we're at the White Horse too. So even she likes it. So the British people are just terrified with their government. Why the government is doing this, I don't know. I can't tell you why the British government does it.
Well, I'll just throw in a quick footnote for John to think about this. It was a guy in 1995-ish or 6 who told me that he had a video of a black helicopter coming up over Woodborough Hill, and there was a formation down between Woodborough and Picket Hill, and the helicopter was coming over Woodborough. He had his camera aimed at what turned out to be, I think it was 4, 5, or 6 white glowing lights moving down in the crop below where the formation was. The helicopter came down between those two hills, clearly going in the direction of the lights, as if it had some technology that was picking up that this phenomena was there. And the lights took off, going off out toward the east field, and then the helicopter rose, and he got all of this on film. And he was talking to me about using this for a documentary in the United States, and we were talking both there in England and long distance. And after he had talked with me about my purchasing license for us to be able to show this video for a documentary in the United States, somebody from the UK, MI6 or some agency, went to him and said specifically that he was never to let out any of that videotape, and that he wanted this man to know that the UK government was using infrared in videotape and flying over all the fields looking for the light phenomena to, quote, chase it away, close quote.
It's all reliable. Friends of mine have people you never know have sent me photos of the orbs flying over the thing, and it just comes right out of their camera. It's all completely true, but I just haven't seen one myself.
Okay.
But it's an issue for John and for you, the discussion of what in the world could be the small plasma, if that's what it is, programmed plasmas that can interact on this planet. What is it that the UK and the US and the allies of World War II think they know about that plasma technology that they don't want any of the rest of the world to know about or take seriously?
I mean, my hunch is, Linda, you're right. There's an ongoing battle between different alien factions going on, and the crop artists are enemies of the Greys. So if you have an alliance between the Greys and the secret military alliance between the Greys and the US and UK, part of their governments, obviously they don't want the other aliens coming in to do things in the fields. There's a war of some sort going on between the factions here, is my personal view.
Do you think there's anything special about where RAF Bentwaters, Woodbridge, and Rendlesham are historically, that there could be some kind of an underground limestone water base there?
John, I don't know. John might know. I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure either. That was one of the things. But since we asked about Woodbridge and Bentwaters, what 7 out of the message? What 7 locations do you believe Penniston's codes are? What your work did? Where do the different locations lead to? And is there a tie into these locations? Maybe you can answer that, because you did quite a bit of work on that.
I'm going to quickly talk for a second. I'm quickly going to look up where all 6 of them were, okay? Because I can't remember. There were 6 of them. I've got an article on it here. If you go to Year 8100 Crop Circle, if anybody is listening to this, go to Year 8100 Crop Circle on Google and you'll find the article, okay?
And also at earthfiles.com, I have the whole Wadley Part 1 and Part 2 that contains all of the Rendlesham Penniston compared to Sergeant CJ there as well.
So they went to Caracol. I think they were just visiting important places in the past. They go to Caracol Pyramid in Brazil. They go somewhere near Montezuma Castle in Arizona, the Giza Pyramid Complex in Egypt, the Nazca Lines in Peru, Taishan Mountain in China, and Portaro Naxos. So it seems like a visitation like in Fringe. I guess the Fringe TV show comes back. The observers go back in time, and why do you go there to these events? It was important. These are the important things they wanted to come back and see, things that were important.
But what if it is the incubator in the craft that Lynn Buchanan remote viewed, and that we're actually dealing with some sort of a civilization with a survival problem, and they're trying to find places on planets where they can drop something from their incubator to see if it will survive?
I don't know. It doesn't say anything about that in the codes. I mean, you're asking me about the codes, so I don't really know. What they're very, to my mind, my guess is that some of them are human time travelers from our future. And maybe they do have a survival trouble, or maybe they're just protecting time. Or, for example, suppose time isn't what we think at all. I'm going to be a little hard for the audience. Suppose time is like a long worm, and we only in one little part of the worm. And somewhere in the worm, it gets pushed sideways really hard by some unexpected force. And that change is going to propagate forward to the future. Now, if it gets to where they are, they're in trouble. So they might come back and try to repair the damage to time. This is Stephen Hawking's idea of the Chronology Protection Agency. So it's possible once you have time travel, since we don't understand it, people from the future will try to protect the past and protect any changes which might flow forward. So that's my personal view. They're not threatening us. They protect the integrity of the timeline which leads to them. They're like a squirrel out on a branch. Somebody's sawing it off further down below, you know? So this is my...
So what do the unfriendlies want to gain?
Well, time travel would be a very powerful weapon, wouldn't it? You know? You still there?
Yeah, I'm listening and thinking.
Well, if you have time travel, you don't need guns. You can go keep Hitler alive. You can keep Kennedy alive. You can do any sorts of political change carefully. Introduce PCR, like Carrie Mullis got PCR from aliens. You know, the PCR of biology. If you want to stimulate Earth's biology, take some guy from California, show him how to do PCR, and let him tell everybody else how to do it. That happened in 1983. You know, Carrie, that's how PCR came into the world.
And John might not know that he had that ET experience before he came up with that PRC technique. He did
PCR, which
PRA. Yeah, he had an ET encounter.
And
Carrie
Carrie Mullis, Nobel Prize, non-coincidental.
Yeah.
That's somehow related to either he saw it or he was put in his mind by telepathy, like for this sergeant, or something happened. And now PCR is the biggest technology on Earth. It's like the biggest thing. I was just working in a PCR lab yesterday. And so the C did that into Earth biology quite effectively, whoever that was. So that's an easy way of changing the future, changing a timeline, isn't it?
Well, what do you think when you parallel that the current Sergeant CJ says that it was clear to him that the doors are closing, we're running out of time. He had that in his discussion with me, the recorded interview. And when you go back to Crabwood near Winchester, that one was also about that time. Basically, you had the sense there was still time, but time was running out, that doors are closing. What do you suppose that means in this whole issue of the future of this planet and timelines? What would be shortening? What would be closing in on us?
Well, they don't tell us the specific threat. Probably it would be a bad idea to tell us the specific. They won't say if it's environmental. They won't say if the gray aliens are going to attack. They won't say if it's they won't say what the threat is. But there's some threat that's going to basically wipe us out in this century by 2050. I don't think it's that soon. And they're making changes to change the technology, to change whatever beforehand. They're trying to get us advance for planetary survival. They can't avoid it. If whatever it is, they can't stop it. It's coming like a ship. But if we advance enough, we'll survive. And this seems to be a very strong message, if you agree, Linda. And they won't tell me. I mean, if they told you, would you really want to know?
Yes. Yes. I
people
want to know. I want to know the good, the bad, the indifferent. I think that you are strengthened when you know what's out there, because at least if they said tomorrow the world is going to end, I would just relax to watch what happened. And I'm not being comical. What I mean is, when you know what's coming, you at least feel like you have a fair chance to do what meant something to you before whatever's going to go down.
I think that's exactly right. I think if they told us, say, in the year 2032, something's going to happen, it could be anything, that at that point the human race would just give up and not make any efforts at survival. And this is not their goal. So then obviously they're never going to say that. Just put yourself in their position, that they're trying actually to keep us surviving. We have some friends. So that's what all this is about. I mean, they're not going to tell me what it's about. It's interesting, the one at Torino that was next to an airport. They drew it next to an airport when the Pope was in town. So maybe it was in Latin. Maybe it was a message for the Pope. The Pope should reveal, expose potential knowledge, hidden knowledge. So he was the Pope was just right there, and they put it in an airport right next to who was visiting. So, and a message in Latin. So it's very suggestive that message was for the Pope, but nobody knows.
And Kali, look at what has been being exposed about the sexual perversions and now the corruptions of money in banks in the Vatican.
Yeah. The other thing, which I didn't want to tell your listeners because they might upset them, and I don't want to be politically incorrect. I guess we're already incorrect. The last 4 crop pictures of 2015, which I went to one of them, or 2 of them, there were certainly 4 what you call Christian crop pictures in Germany and England near the end. The signet of Melchizedek, the sign of Melchizedek. And I went to one on August 4th, and Sean Randall was there, and this big complex image in the field near Etchelhampton. And there were hundreds of Europeans were there, and we were all looking and said, what does this mean? Why is the crop swirled in 300 different ways? And then it turns out, this is very interesting. It turns out later I went back and I put it as an open question on Facebook. I don't know what this means. What is this crop picture showing us? And Mr. Gyro got the photos, and we were puzzled, scratching our head, And somebody noticed what it is. There's a famous mural in Kosovo, in Serbia, in the church. In Kosovo, there's a mural, this monastery, and it shows the crucifixion of Christ with 2 UFOs flying over it. If you remember that. Mm-hmm. And the crop circle shows one of the face of the man and one of those men flying the UFO over the crucifixion of Christ. The star of Ishtar, the 8-pointed star of Ishtar, was drawn in crops on August 4th. So he's the same guy probably who flew over the crucifixion who made the crop picture. And so it's certainly some relation there. So there's something about the Christian empire returning as well. For these are the end times. The Christians are returning, and they're just showing artworks and hinting at it. They won't say exactly, but there's no doubt it's a Christian element, not in terms of like the church Christian, but in terms of the church Christian as an interstellar empire. There are many mansions in my Father's empire, so there's no doubt there's an element of that coming in. So for what it's worth, that whether these are the return of Christ or the signs of the return of Christ, you have to think of the book of Joel, that there'll be signs on the earth before Jesus returns or whoever comes, and they look very much like the biblical prophecy of signs on the earth. I don't want to be over fundamentalist because I'm not, but it certainly looks like that's what the crop circles represent as well.
And it feels like we're getting closer and closer to some kind of war near Megiddo.
You want to know, nobody else wants to know. Nobody else wants to know the whole truth. I'd rather not know something bad's going to happen. But Linda wants to know.
Everything. I would like to know everything.
Well, I mean, okay, my take on that is that, okay, if all this is going on, something from the future is interacting, trying to warn us, you call them grays or something else, there's all this going on. But ultimately, it's our call on how we survive. But they don't want to tell us exactly when we're going to, D-Day is going to happen or whatever. I mean, you could take all that with interest, but ultimately, if you just look around the state of the world today, we're close to war, economic collapse. We're very close to, possibly environmental damage that there'll be no return, whether it's man-made, stuff that happens every 10 or 15,000 years or whatever. So we're coming up on the cusp of something. So if that's not enough to wake mankind up and start asking tough questions, then maybe we're just not meant to be. I mean, that's something.
Linda. Oh, go ahead, John.
That's what I'm saying. That's something that maybe it's time people start paying more attention to things other than whether Donald Trump's hair looks this way or that, and starts really looking at their surroundings and start paying more attention to where we're heading and what we can do together, not continue to fight and kill each other. That's just my take on all this.
Amen. Amen.
Linda, what would you do if you were a time traveler and you went to the year 2100 or 2050 and you saw that we were just zapped by something? Would you go back and tell the people in 2015, I'm sorry, it's such a year you're going to be zapped? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to go back and say, well, maybe we can make something, maybe we can fix something out of this. So that's what's happening, okay?
I do understand what you're saying, but you'd have to have the sophistication of the time travelers' technology and knowledge to make the decision to try to influence the timelines, as opposed to going and making it clear to the population that is heading over the Lemming Hill that that's where they're headed and they may not survive. Do you see?
Sorry, Linda, we're out of time.
Okay.
It's time to close the show down. Red, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. I really hope some people have listened intently and have more of an open mind after tonight. So thanks again for coming on. And Race, take us forward to next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Red Colley. Next week on Phenomenon Radio, Brenda Butler, Dot Street, and Jenny Randles will join the show to talk about the early days of the Rendlesham case. For John Burroughs, Linda Moulton Howe, and our very special guest, Red Colley, I'm Race Hobbs for Phenomenon Radio. Thank you for joining us tonight, right here on the station that brings you the very best in paranormal talk radio topics on the internet. We're KGRAradio.com.